A chilling sense of uncertainty lingered in the air as I stepped into the doctor's office, the sound of my footsteps echoing down the sterile hallway. It had been a long day, one filled with too many appointments, too many questions, and not enough answers. But this one felt different. It was more than just another checkup, more than a simple visit. It was a turning point. As I walked through the door, I could sense something was off. The walls of the room, painted in a soft, clinical white, seemed to close in around me. The faint smell of antiseptic hung in the air, the kind that always made my stomach turn, but it wasn't the smell that unsettled me. It was the man sitting behind the desk, Dr. Ivanov. His presence was like a storm waiting to break. He sat there, calm and collected, his dark eyes peering at me over the rim of his glasses. He was a man of few words, yet there was something about him that spoke volumes. His reputation had preceded him, of course, known for his blunt approach, no-nonsense attitude, and an almost unsettling confidence. Dr. Ivanov was someone you didn't question. "Please, sit down," he said, his voice low, commanding, yet not unfriendly. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to behave. Most doctors I'd encountered in the past had been warm, welcoming, eager to ease your nerves. Not Dr. Ivanov. His presence alone demanded respect. I sat down in the chair across from him, my heart racing as he looked me over. He wasn't just a doctor, he was a man who knew what he wanted and how to get it. He studied me for a moment, his gaze piercing, as though trying to see through the layers of my life, my history and my soul. There was no sympathy in his eyes, no attempt at comforting me. He was here to get results, not to hold your hand. "You're here for a reason," he said abruptly. "Tell me what brought you to me." His words were direct, cutting through the air like a blade. Most people would have been taken aback by his bluntness, but I had a feeling this was just how he worked. No time for pleasantries, no space for weakness. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves before speaking. "I've been feeling off," I began, hesitating as I thought about how to describe the strange symptoms I'd been experiencing. Constant fatigue, dizziness, headaches. It's been going on for months now. He nodded, as if he'd already expected this. There was no surprise, no hint of curiosity. It was as if he had seen this 100 times before. Symptoms, common enough. But they don't concern me. What concerns me is the reason you're here. His words hung in the air. He wasn't asking for a diagnosis, he was asking for something deeper, something more personal. I swallowed hard. "I don't know what you mean." Dr. Ivanov leaned forward, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk. "You know exactly what I mean. You're not here because of a few headaches. You're here because you've run out of options. You've tried everything else and now you're desperate." His eyes narrowed as if reading my every thought. I froze, caught in the intensity of his gaze. How could he know that? How could he understand the frustration and hopelessness I'd felt for months? I had tried countless doctors, different treatments, every possible remedy, but nothing had worked. I felt like a failure. And now, here I was, in front of a man who seemed to already understand my story better than I did. "What are you really looking for, doctor?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady but failing. A cure, an answer? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for a pen and began scribbling something on his notepad. The silence stretched between us, heavy and thick, before he finally spoke again, his voice colder now, more calculating. "I'm not here to give you answers," he said. "I'm here to help you find them. But it's not going to be easy. I won't sugarcoat it for you. If you want my help, you'll have to trust me. Trust in a process that might make you uncomfortable." I could feel my pulse quicken. Trust, that was a word I hadn't been ready to hear. Trust hadn't come easily to me after everything I'd been through. Trust had been shattered time and time again by doctors who promised everything and delivered nothing. Yet, something in Dr. Ivanov's words cut through the layers of doubt and skepticism I'd built up over the years. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. How could I trust him? How could I trust anyone after all the disappointment? but there was something compelling about him, something that made me wonder if maybe, just maybe, he was different. "You're skeptical," he said, almost as if reading my mind. "I understand that. But that's why you're here, isn't it? Because the other doctors failed you. Because they couldn't give you what you needed. I won't be like them." His words echoed in my mind, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. It was faint, barely a spark, but it was there. "I'll do what you ask," I said quietly, my voice barely a whisper. Just tell me what to do." Dr. Ivanov gave a slight nod, his lips curling into a subtle smile. "Good. That's all I need to hear." But what I didn't know was that agreeing to his terms would lead me down a path that would change my life forever. Dr. Ivanov's methods were not like any I had encountered before. They would challenge everything I thought I knew about medicine, about healing, and about myself. And yet, as the door to the unknown began to creak open, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play here. Something more dangerous. I didn't realize it at the time, but this encounter was only the beginning of a journey that would test my limits, my beliefs, and my understanding of what it meant to be healed. The days that followed Emily's first meeting with Dr. Ivanov felt like a blur. It wasn't just the shock of his directness that lingered in her mind. It was the unsettling feeling that he knew something she didn't, something she wasn't ready to confront. But despite the fear, there was a strange pull, a flicker of hope that refused to die. She had agreed to trust him, and now there was no turning back. Dr. Ivanov didn't waste time with pleasantries. He asked for every detail of her life, every medical history, every symptom. He wanted to know it all. But there was something different about how he asked, something more invasive. He wasn't simply taking notes for a diagnosis. He was digging, searching for something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface. Emily had learned to distrust doctors who asked too many questions. She had been poked, prodded, and examined for years. But Dr. Ivanov's questions felt different. They were probing her soul, testing her resolve, and she couldn't quite put her finger on why. His eyes never left hers as she spoke, as if he could read the very essence of her. For the first time, she felt exposed in a way she never had before. The next time Emily arrived at his office, she was both anxious and curious. It had been a week since their initial meeting, and already Dr. Ivanov had begun a series of tests, strange and unconventional ones. He had asked her to come in fasting, without any makeup, without any distractions, to allow him to see the truth of her condition. She didn't fully understand it, but she was following his instructions. When she entered his office that day, he didn't greet her with the usual formality. Instead, he simply waved her toward the chair, his face unreadable. There was something about his demeanor that suggested he was working on something important, but it was also clear that he wasn't about to explain it to her. "Sit," he commanded, his voice steady but firm. "Today we begin." Emily hesitated for only a moment before sitting down. She had no idea what was about to happen, but there was no turning back. Dr. Ivanov had a way of making her feel both terrified and intrigued at the same time. He was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. "First," he began, his voice low and calculating, "we will run a test of sorts, not one you're used to." "What do you mean?" Emily asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Another blood test?" "No," he replied quickly. "Something more revealing. Something you'll not find in any textbook." Emily sat back in the chair, trying to steady her breathing. She had heard that Dr. Ivanov's methods were unorthodox, but she hadn't expected this. What was he going to do? She could feel the unease rising within her, a cold sweat forming on the back of her neck. But there was also something else, something powerful, a curiosity that burned in her chest. Dr. Ivanov rose from his desk and walked toward a cabinet. He opened it slowly, almost ceremoniously, before pulling out a small, sleek device she didn't recognize. It looked like a high-tech scanner, the kind of equipment she might see in a sci-fi movie, but it seemed too real to be anything other than what it was, an instrument of mystery. He set it down on the table in front of her, his hands steady and sure. "This," he said, "is a bioscan, a highly advanced diagnostic tool. It can tell me things about you that no regular exam will uncover. It will show me the real cause of your condition." Emily's heart skipped a beat. What did he mean by the real cause? Was there something more to her symptoms than she had imagined? And how could this strange machine reveal what no other test had found? "I don't understand," Emily said, her voice a mixture of confusion and fear. "What's this going to do? Will it hurt?" "Pain is a relative term," Dr. Ivanov replied, his voice still cold. "This machine won't hurt you, but it will show me everything you've been hiding, the questions you've never asked yourself. It will expose the truth." Emily's mind raced. What was he talking about? Was there something she was hiding? Something in her body, in her life, that had caused this endless spiral of illness? "You don't need to be afraid," he continued, sensing her hesitation. "You've already agreed to the process. You've trusted me. Trust that I will find the answer. And trust that what I discover will be the key to solving your condition." There was something about the way he said it that made Emily feel trapped. He was right, she had agreed to follow his methods. But she hadn't anticipated this. She hadn't known that the path to an answer would feel like a journey into the unknown, a journey that might expose her darkest fears. "Now, Emily," Dr. Ivanov said, "we begin." He motioned for her to lie back in the chair, and though she was trembling, she obeyed. She had already come this far. What was one more step? Her mind was spinning with questions, but she forced herself to focus on his voice, the steady, confident tone that had led her through every uncertainty. The bioscan hummed to life, a soft whirring sound filling the silence of the room. Dr. Ivanov positioned the device above her body, moving it over her chest, her abdomen, her arms, as if looking for something specific. Emily lay there, eyes closed, her heart pounding, as she tried to make sense of what was happening. What was this machine doing? What was it revealing? "I know this seems strange," Dr. Ivanov said after a long silence, his voice as calm as ever, "but sometimes the answers lie in places we don't expect, in areas we've never thought to look. And your condition, Emily, is much more complicated than you realize." Emily swallowed, the words hitting her harder than she expected. More complicated than she realized? What could that mean? Had she been missing something all along? Had she been looking in the wrong places for the wrong answers? She opened her eyes and glanced at Dr. Ivanov, who was still focused on the machine, his brow furrowed as he read the data it was producing. After what felt like an eternity, he finally turned to her. "The results are in. We've found something." Emily's heart skipped a beat. What had he discovered? Was this the breakthrough she had been waiting for, or was it just another dead end? Dr. Ivanov's eyes locked with hers, and for the first time Emily saw something in them. A spark of intensity, a glimmer of understanding. "What I've found," he said, "is not what you expected, but it is what you needed." The room felt colder as the words left Dr. Ivanov's mouth. "What I've found is not what you expected, but it is what you needed." Emily's pulse quickened, a wave of anxiety crashing over her. She had been searching for answers for so long, so many failed appointments, countless tests, and all of it had come up empty. She had hoped for something that would make sense, something straightforward, but now, after hearing Dr. Ivanov's cryptic words, she feared that perhaps she had stumbled into something far more complicated than she could handle. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her best effort to sound composed. "What did you find?" Dr. Ivanov didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned back to the bioscan, his fingers quickly navigating through the data, his eyes scanning the screen with a focused intensity. Emily waited, her heart pounding, a mix of hope and dread swirling inside her. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours. She wanted to ask again, to push him for answers, but something about the way he was working, so calm, so deliberate, made her pause. She knew that whatever was coming would change everything. But how? And was she ready for that? Finally, Dr. Ivanov broke the silence. He turned to her, his eyes serious, yet there was a hint of something deeper there, something Emily couldn't quite place. Emily, what I've found isn't something you're likely to hear from any other doctor. It's not a diagnosis you would have expected. His words were measured, like he was trying to prepare her for something heavy. What I see here isn't a disease or a syndrome that can be treated with medicine alone. It's something that stems deeper, something connected to your mind, your body, your entire life. Emily sat up, her hands shaking. What does that mean? I don't understand. You're saying it's all in my head? Dr. Ivanov's gaze softened for just a moment, but only for a moment. Not in your head, Emily. But it is a combination of things that have built up over time. Stress, trauma, unprocessed emotions, even the things you haven't allowed yourself to acknowledge. Your body is reacting to all of it. His words hit her like a slap. She had been to therapy before. She had tried to confront her fears, to work through her past. But those things were always just whispers in the background, things she never fully confronted. Life had a way of piling up, of burying the difficult moments under the weight of everyday existence. What are you saying, Dr. Ivanov? She whispered, her voice barely audible now. Are you saying my illness is all in my past, in my emotions? He nodded, but there was no pity in his eyes, only a calm understanding, as though this revelation was simply another piece of the puzzle. Exactly. Your body is overwhelmed by everything you've been through. The trauma, the loss, the unresolved pain. It's manifesting physically. And because it's been hidden so deeply, no traditional doctor could ever find it. Emily felt a lump form in her throat. She hadn't realized how much she had been carrying, how much her mind had been holding on to, burying in the corners of her soul. All the sleepless nights, the moments of feeling lost, the times she had shoved her pain down so deep it seemed to vanish, only for it to bubble back up in unexpected ways. It wasn't just her body that was sick, it was everything inside her. I don't know if I can do this, she murmured, her voice cracking as the weight of his words pressed down on her. What do I even do now? How do I fix it? Dr. Ivanov's expression remained steady. You don't fix it, Emily. You confront it. You face it head on. And that's where the real healing begins. But how? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. She was overwhelmed, unsure of what steps to take, how to even begin the journey Dr. Ivanov was suggesting. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss of the unknown. She had been searching for a cure, a quick fix, and instead, Dr. Ivanov had just handed her a painful truth. You begin by accepting what you've been running from, Dr. Ivanov continued, his voice unwavering. You allow yourself to feel what you've been avoiding, the fear, the pain, the anger. Only then can we start to unravel the knot you've been carrying in your body. Emily didn't know how to respond. She had spent years avoiding her feelings, pushing away the things that caused her pain, only to end up in this office, at the mercy of a man who seemed to understand her better than anyone ever had. She wanted to run, to leave, to reject this approach, and find something easier, something that wouldn't force her to confront all the wounds she had buried deep inside her. But there was something in Dr. Ivanov's eyes that made her stay, something that said, this will work, but only if you trust it. Do you trust me, Emily? He asked, his voice softening just enough for her to hear the underlying seriousness. Do you trust me to guide you through this? The question hung in the air, thick with the weight of everything that had come before and everything that would come after. Emily closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She had spent so long feeling lost, feeling like she was in a constant state of confusion and exhaustion. Maybe it was time to face what she had been avoiding. I trust you, she said, the words feeling heavy on her tongue. But they felt right, too. For the first time, she was willing to take that first step, to stop running from the truth. Dr. Ivanov gave a small nod. Good. Because what comes next won't be easy. It will force you to look at things you'd rather leave behind. But if you do this, if you push through the discomfort, you'll come out stronger on the other side. I promise you that. Emily nodded, though her heart was still racing. She wasn't sure what was to come, but she knew she couldn't keep living in the dark. She had to confront whatever had been festering inside her. whatever had been sabotaging her health. And maybe, just maybe, this was the only way to truly heal. Dr. Ivanov's expression softened, just for a moment. It was brief, but enough for Emily to see that he wasn't some cold, calculating doctor. He cared. In his own way, he wanted to help her, perhaps more than any of the others had, and that was enough to give her the courage she needed. "Now," he said, standing up and moving toward a cabinet on the other side of the room, "the healing begins." The days that followed were unlike any Emily had ever experienced. Dr. Ivanov's approach was methodical but intense. Unlike the sterile routine of most doctors she had seen before. There were no comforting words, no soft reassurance. Everything was stripped down to the rawness of the truth, and it was up to Emily to face it head-on. It wasn't easy. Dr. Ivanov had insisted that the only way to truly heal was to face the things she had been avoiding, both mentally and emotionally. He called it unburdening the soul, but Emily couldn't help but feel that it was more like tearing her life apart, to rebuild it from the ground up. The process was grueling. Each session with Dr. Ivanov was like peeling back another layer of a wound she had kept buried for years, and each layer felt more painful than the last. He didn't just want to know about her symptoms, he wanted to understand the moments in her life that had shaped her, the hidden traumas that had remained locked away in the dark corners of her mind. Emily had always been the type to bottle things up, to move on as if nothing had ever happened. She'd been taught to keep going, to keep moving forward, no matter how much the past weighed her down. But Dr. Ivanov didn't allow that. He forced her to slow down, to breathe, to listen to the parts of her that she had long ignored.
"You're holding on to more than you realize," he said one day, his voice steady as always, but with an edge of concern she hadn't noticed before. "Every time you suppress a memory, a feeling, you lock it away inside you. And it doesn't just disappear, it festers." Emily sat in the chair across from him, her hands gripping the armrests tightly. She didn't want to hear this. She didn't want to be forced to confront the things she had spent years pushing aside. But there was no escaping it now. "Tell me, Emily," Dr. Ivanov said softly, his eyes unwavering. "What is the first thing you remember that made you feel helpless?" The question took her by surprise. She hadn't expected it to come so directly, so bluntly. But she knew he was right. She had to answer. She had to confront her past. At first, she resisted. The memories were sharp, painful, and she had pushed them away for a reason. But as she sat there, looking at Dr. Ivanov, something in his gaze told her she couldn't hide anymore. He was asking her to trust him, to trust this process. And so, with a trembling voice, Emily began. "I was a little girl," she said, her throat tightening as the memory resurfaced. "I was 8 when it happened. My mom. She left us. I didn't understand why at the time, but she just disappeared. She walked out of the door one day and never came back." Dr. Ivanov didn't interrupt. He just let the silence hang in the air, allowing Emily to continue at her own pace. Her words were shaky, each one heavy with the weight of years of unanswered questions. "After she left, everything changed. My dad, he wasn't the same. He was angry all the time, but he never talked about it. He didn't tell me why she left. He didn't tell me anything. It was like we were living in a house of silence." Emily's chest tightened as she relived the feelings of abandonment, confusion, and loneliness. She had never spoken about it like this before. She had never allowed herself to feel the full force of those emotions. She had buried them so deep inside her, convincing herself that it didn't matter anymore, that she had moved on. But the truth was, she hadn't moved on at all. The memory of her mother's departure had been a wound that had never healed. "There was one day after school," she continued, her voice cracking as the memory hit her like a wave. "I came home to find my dad sitting on the couch, staring at the wall. He didn't even look at me when I walked in. It was like I wasn't even there. I asked him where Mom was, and he just told me she wasn't coming back. That was it. He didn't say anything else." The pain of that moment was raw, so real, as if it had happened just yesterday.
Emily's heart raced, the years of unresolved grief flooding her all at once. She felt the tears welling up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of Dr. Ivanov, but she couldn't hold it back forever. Dr. Ivanov seemed to understand. He gave her space, allowing the silence to stretch between them. He didn't try to comfort her with empty words. He simply watched, as if waiting for her to continue when she was ready. Emily's chest heaved with emotion. I didn't know how to deal with it. I thought if I pretended everything was fine, it would go away. But it didn't. It just kept eating at me, until I couldn't breathe anymore. And I never told anyone. I never let anyone know how much it hurt. Dr. Ivanov's voice was soft but firm. And now you're paying the price, Emily. Your body is reacting to that unprocessed pain. It's not just a headache or fatigue. It's your soul, your mind, trying to heal what has been broken for too long. The truth of his words settled deep inside her. She had known, on some level, that her physical symptoms weren't just random. They weren't some inexplicable illness. They were her mind's way of screaming for attention, for healing. And yet, she had ignored it for years, not wanting to face the pain that lay beneath the surface. Is this how it's going to be? Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Is this what it takes to get better? To dig through all the pain and the memories? Dr. Ivanov nodded. Yes, it's not easy, but it's necessary. You've spent years running from your past, Emily. But now you must confront it. You must accept that the pain you've been carrying isn't something you can run from anymore. It's time to heal. Emily felt a tear escape down her cheek. She wasn't sure why she was crying, whether it was because of the pain she had uncovered or because of the release she had finally allowed herself. But as the tear slid down her face, something inside her shifted. For the first time in years, she felt like she was finally doing what she needed to do to heal. She was facing the truth. She was allowing herself to feel. I'm ready, she whispered, more to herself than to him. I'm ready to face it. Dr. Ivanov nodded. Good. We'll take it one step at a time, but we will face it together. As the days passed, Emily began to understand what Dr. Ivanov meant by unburdening the soul. It wasn't just a matter of talking about her past. It was about going deeper, peeling back layers of herself she had long since buried. With each session, the weight of her emotions grew heavier. But so did the relief. It was like digging through a pile of debris, reaching for the truth beneath it all. Dr. Ivanov's methods were unorthodox, but Emily had come to realize that his approach was exactly what she needed. He didn't allow her to shy away from the hard truths, the things she had kept hidden even from herself. And though each moment of self-reflection felt like an emotional battlefield, she also began to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. This session, as with the others, began in the same stark, sterile office. The walls felt both confining and safe, a space where Emily could finally explore parts of herself that had been locked away for years. But today, something felt different. The air seemed heavier, as though a shift had taken place. Dr. Ivanov was sitting at his desk, watching her intently, as if waiting for her to make the first move. Emily, he began, his voice low but steady. Today, I want to explore another layer, another moment in your life. You've opened up about your mother, but now I want to ask you about your father. What was your relationship with him like after your mother left? Emily's heart skipped a beat. Her father had always been a distant figure. After her mother's departure, he became a shell of the man he once was, quiet, withdrawn, consumed by his own grief. Emily had spent her childhood tiptoeing around his moods, never fully understanding what had caused him to shut down. She had blamed her mother's absence, but she hadn't truly examined her father's role in her life, in her pain. For a moment, Emily sat there in silence, processing his words. The idea of confronting her relationship with her father made her uncomfortable. He wasn't a villain in her story. He was just a man who had been broken by the same event that had shattered her world. But maybe that was part of the problem. She had never allowed herself to see him as anything more than a silent figure in the background of her grief. "I don't know," she said, her voice barely audible. "He was just distant. I didn't know how to reach him, and he never really tried to reach me." Dr. Ivanov leaned forward slightly, his eyes piercing into hers. "What did you need from him, Emily? What did you wish he had given you?" Emily blinked, her chest tightening as the question hit her harder than she expected. She had never thought about it that way. What had she truly needed from him? A father's love? His protection? Her mind drifted back to those long, lonely nights when she had sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the empty seat across from her, wondering why her father wasn't there. Why he had disappeared into himself, leaving her to navigate the confusion and hurt alone. "I needed him to be there," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I needed him to tell me it was okay, that it wasn't my fault, but he never did. I don't think he even knew how to talk to me." Dr. Ivanov's gaze softened, but he didn't let her off the hook. "And how did that make you feel, that silence? It made me feel invisible," Emily admitted, her voice trembling. "Like I didn't matter, like I was just some afterthought. I didn't understand why he couldn't just talk to me. I was his daughter, and all I wanted was to hear him say that it would be okay." The pain of those years resurfaced with a vengeance. She remembered the way her father's eyes had always been empty, distant, as if he couldn't see her at all. She had spent so many nights wondering if he even cared about her, if he had ever loved her the way a father should. Dr. Ivanov was quiet for a moment, letting her words settle. Then, in his calm, measured tone, he spoke again. "Emily, the silence you felt with your father, it wasn't just his. It was yours too. You were both trapped in your own grief. But now, it's time to ask yourself, what have you carried from that silence? What have you held on to from those years of emotional abandonment?" Emily's stomach twisted as she thought about it. What had she carried? She had spent so much time looking for someone else to fill the empty spaces inside her, never realizing that she had been doing the same thing her father had done, shutting herself off from the world, hiding behind walls of silence. "I've been afraid," she whispered, barely recognizing the words as they left her mouth. "Afraid that I would turn into him, that I would become someone who couldn't connect, someone who couldn't open up. I've been afraid of becoming that empty, distant person. I've been afraid that if I let anyone in, I would be abandoned again." Dr. Ivanov's expression softened, though his gaze remained intense. "That fear, Emily, it's been holding you back, it's been controlling you. But if you want to heal, you must confront it. You must allow yourself to feel, to open up, and to stop running from the very things you fear." Emily sat there, absorbing his words. The weight of everything she had been carrying felt heavier now, but there was also a lightness, a sense of clarity she hadn't felt before. She had spent so long hiding from her past, from her father's silence, and from the fear of becoming someone she didn't recognize. But now, with Dr. Ivanov's guidance, she was finally starting to see the truth. The truth that she didn't have to carry the weight of those fears anymore. "I'm so scared, Dr. Ivanov," she admitted, her voice shaking with vulnerability. "What if I can't let go of it? What if I can't change?" He nodded, acknowledging her fear, but his voice remained steady and reassuring. "Fear is natural, Emily. It's what keeps us from growing. But it's also the key to your transformation. You must confront it, face it, and let it go. Only then will you find the freedom you seek." For the first time in a long time, Emily felt a sense of peace within herself. It wasn't a solution, and it certainly wasn't the end of her journey, but it was a beginning to let go of the silence, the fear, and the pain she had carried for so long. "I'm ready to try," she said quietly, a tear slipping down her cheek. But this time, it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of release, a tear of acceptance. Dr. Ivanov gave her a small nod. "Good. We'll take it one step at a time. But know this, the road to healing is long, and it won't always be easy. But you don't have to do it alone." And for the first time in her life, Emily believed him. Healing was never a linear process. For every breakthrough, there was a setback. For every moment of clarity, there was a wave of doubt that threatened to pull Emily under again. But one thing had changed. She had begun to trust Dr. Ivanov's methods. Even when the emotional weight seemed unbearable, she knew she was facing the root of her pain instead of hiding from it. Over the next few weeks, Emily found herself coming to terms with parts of her past she had long ignored. Her sessions with Dr. Ivanov continued, each one pulling her deeper into her own history, confronting the shadows that had shaped her life. And yet, despite the challenges, there was a subtle shift in her perception, a quiet understanding that healing required both strength and surrender. Today, Emily sat in Dr. Ivanov's office, feeling the familiar tension in her chest. It was another session, and though she had made progress, she knew the work wasn't over. Dr. Ivanov hadn't promised that it would be easy. In fact, he had warned her from the start that the hardest part of the journey would be letting go, the letting go of all the things that had once defined her, the fear, the anger, the loneliness. He had been right. Letting go was the hardest part. "Emily," Dr. Ivanov began, his voice calm and steady, "today I want you to focus on a new part of your past. We've addressed the absence of your mother and your father's silence. But now we need to look at the pain you've carried from your own decisions, the guilt you've held onto for so long." Emily froze, her stomach tightening. Guilt. It was a word she had avoided for years, yet it had been a constant companion in her life. There were moments when she had acted impulsively, moments when she had hurt others and herself. She hadn't allowed herself to feel that guilt fully because deep down, she was terrified of what it would reveal about her. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," Emily admitted, her voice trembling. "What if I can't face it? What if I regret what I've done?" Dr. Ivanov didn't respond right away. Instead, he studied her with his usual intensity, his eyes unwavering. There was no judgment in his gaze, only a quiet understanding that she was not yet ready to fully open up. But he knew, he had always known, that in time she would be. "Regret is a natural part of life, Emily," he said gently. "But it is only a moment. It does not define you. The important thing is to learn from it and allow yourself the grace to move forward. What you are holding on to is not the regret, it is the belief that you are unworthy of forgiveness. You must let go of that belief." The words hit Emily like a revelation. Unworthy of forgiveness. That was it, wasn't it? She had been carrying the weight of guilt for so long, convinced that she didn't deserve to move on. The mistakes she had made, the people she had hurt, they were all pieces of a puzzle she had never allowed herself to solve. And every time she thought about it, the guilt threatened to drown her, to pull her back into the darkness. Dr. Ivanov's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. "Emily, I want you to think back to a time when you hurt someone, a moment when you felt that guilt in your bones. Do you remember it?" Emily closed her eyes, the memory instantly flooding her mind. It was a relationship she had left behind, a man she had loved but never truly understood. She had pushed him away when things got difficult, when her own fears of abandonment took over. She had acted out of desperation, not thinking about the consequences of her actions. And in the end, it was her own guilt that had caused her the most pain. "I remember," Emily whispered, her voice soft. "I ended things with him when he needed me the most. I didn't give him a chance. I walked away without looking back, and it broke him. I know I hurt him." Dr. Ivanov nodded, his eyes never leaving her. "And how does that make you feel now, Emily?" She swallowed hard, the weight of the admission settling heavy in her chest. "It makes me feel like I'm a terrible person, like I ruined something that could have been good, like I destroyed something beautiful because I was afraid." The tears came then, unbidden and raw, slipping down her cheeks. Emily had spent so long holding in the pain, keeping it buried under the weight of everything else, that now, in this moment, it felt like everything was rushing to the surface at once. She had never allowed herself to feel the full extent of her guilt until now. It was as if the floodgates had opened, and there was no stopping it. Dr. Ivanov sat in silence, giving her the space to feel what she needed to feel. It was never about telling her what to feel. It was about allowing her to confront the emotions that had been buried too deep for too long. He knew that this was a crucial part of the healing process, this breaking down of the walls she had built to protect herself. Only then could she rebuild. When the tears subsided, Emily looked up at Dr. Ivanov, her chest still tight but her heart lighter. "I don't know if I can forgive myself for that." He leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle but firm. "Forgiveness is not a gift you give to others, Emily. It is something you give to yourself. Until you forgive yourself, you will remain trapped in your guilt. You will never move forward, and you will continue to carry the weight of it for the rest of your life." Her mind raced. Forgiveness. It sounded so simple, but she knew it wasn't. How could she forgive herself for something so painful, so final? How could she forgive herself for a mistake that had left a permanent scar? "Forgiving myself means accepting that I wasn't perfect," she said slowly, almost to herself. "It means accepting that I made mistakes, but those mistakes don't have to define me. I don't have to keep punishing myself for them." Dr. Ivanov nodded, his eyes softening for the first time. "Exactly. You are not the sum of your mistakes. You are the sum of your decisions, your growth, your willingness to change. And in this moment, you are choosing to heal. You are choosing to let go of the past and embrace what lies ahead." Emily took a deep breath, the weight of those words sinking in. She wasn't perfect. She had made mistakes, hurt others, hurt herself. But she didn't have to carry that guilt forever. She didn't have to punish herself for the rest of her life. "I'm ready," she whispered. Her voice steady now, a quiet strength building inside her. "I'm ready to let go." Dr. Ivanov gave her a small, knowing smile. "Then we take the next step, one step at a time. You're not alone, Emily, and you don't have to carry this burden any longer." For the first time, Emily felt the weight of the world lift from her shoulders. It wasn't gone entirely. She knew there was more work to do, but she had taken the first step. She'd begun the process of forgiving herself. And that was enough. The days following her breakthrough were a mixture of relief and quiet introspection. Emily found herself reflecting more on the lessons Dr. Ivanov had been teaching her, especially the idea of forgiveness, not just for others but for herself. Each day she woke up feeling a little lighter, a little more capable of facing the world with a renewed sense of clarity. For the first time in a long time, she found herself looking forward to her sessions with Dr. Ivanov, not because she was seeking a quick fix, but because she knew that with each session she was peeling back another layer of her past, confronting more of the pain that had held her captive for so long. The road to healing was long, but with every step, she was closer to freedom. Today, as Emily walked into Dr. Ivanov's office, she felt a calm resolve in her chest. The weight of her past was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She had learned to live with it, to acknowledge it, without letting it dictate her every thought and action. Dr. Ivanov greeted her with his usual quiet intensity, but today there was something different in his eyes, something warmer, something almost approving. Emily hadn't realized how much his presence had come to mean to her, but now, in the stillness of the room, she recognized that it was his unwavering belief in her that had kept her going through this difficult journey. "You've made progress, Emily," Dr. Ivanov said, as she sat down across from him. His voice, though always calm, carried a weight of approval that she hadn't heard before. "I can see it in the way you carry yourself. You are not the same person who walked into this room weeks ago." Emily nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I feel different. I don't feel like I'm carrying the world on my shoulders anymore." Dr. Ivanov studied her for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly as though searching for something in her expression. "You have let go of a great deal, but there is still one piece left, one piece that will allow you to truly complete your healing." Her heart skipped a beat. Was there more? Had she missed something? "What piece?" she asked, her voice steady despite the sudden rise of nervous energy inside her. "Forgiveness," Dr. Ivanov said simply, but there was no hint of judgment in his tone. "I've taught you to forgive yourself, to accept your past and the mistakes you've made. But there's one more step, one more thing you must do. Emily felt a pang in her chest. She thought she had already done everything. She thought forgiveness was the final piece of the puzzle. But Dr. Ivanov's gaze remained focused, and she knew that this wasn't a game. He wasn't going to let her slide by. There was still something more she needed to face. "Who else do you need to forgive?" he asked, his voice gentle but insistent. Emily took a deep breath. She'd been expecting this. She knew that the last step, the final part of her healing, was going to be difficult, but she had no idea just how hard it would be. Forgiving herself had been hard enough, but now Dr. Ivanov was asking her to take that same leap of faith with someone else, someone she hadn't been able to forgive for years. The answer came slowly, like a reluctant confession. "My father," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Dr. Ivanov didn't speak, but his silence was a comfort. It was as though he understood exactly what Emily was going through without needing to say a word. The relationship with her father had always been strained. After her mother left, he had withdrawn into himself, unable to connect with her, unable to provide the love and support she needed. He had left her in the dark, just as much as her mother had, and Emily had carried that weight for so long. "I've never been able to forgive him for abandoning me," Emily continued, her voice breaking as the words spilled out. "I was just a little girl, and I needed him, but he was so lost in his own grief that he couldn't even see me. He left me to fend for myself, and I've never been able to let go of that. I thought that if I held on to the anger, it would protect me. But it hasn't." Dr. Ivanov nodded slowly, acknowledging the depth of her pain. "Your father's actions, Emily, were born from his own pain. He was not capable of being there for you in the way you needed. But that does not mean you have to carry his absence forever. You must forgive him, not for his sake but for yours. Holding on to that anger, that resentment, only keeps you trapped in the past. It holds you back from the future." Emily felt the weight of his words settle over her. She had spent so many years holding on to the anger she felt for her father, but now, sitting in front of Dr. Ivanov, she realized that the anger had been a crutch. It had been something she clung to in order to avoid the painful reality, that her father had his own demons, his own struggles. He was a broken man, and while his actions had hurt her deeply, they had not been entirely his fault. "I don't know if I can forgive him," she said, her voice small. "It feels impossible." Dr. Ivanov's gaze softened, but his voice remained steady. "Forgiveness is not about excusing someone's behavior, Emily. It is about freeing yourself from the burden of carrying that pain. You don't have to forget what he did, but you must release the hold it has over you. Only then can you truly move forward." The silence between them stretched, but Emily could feel something inside her beginning to shift. The anger, the resentment, the hurt. It was all there, festering in the background. But Dr. Ivanov's words resonated with her, in a way she couldn't ignore. She had been holding on to her father's absence for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to let go of the pain. "Can I really do this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can I really forgive him?" "You can," Dr. Ivanov said firmly, "but it starts with you. You have the power to release that anger, to give yourself peace. You don't need your father's approval. You don't need his validation. What you need is to accept that he did the best he could with what he had. And now you must let go." Emily sat in silence, processing his words. It wasn't an easy thing to forgive someone who had hurt you so deeply, but for the first time she felt a shift, a small but significant shift. She didn't need to carry this burden anymore. She didn't need to keep punishing herself for the things her father had failed to do. "I'm ready," she said quietly, her voice filled with a newfound strength. "I'm ready to forgive him." Dr. Ivanov nodded, a subtle smile crossing his face. "Then, Emily, you have taken the final step toward your healing." For the first time in her life, Emily felt free. She wasn't burdened by the weight of anger and resentment. She had forgiven herself, and now she had forgiven her father. It wasn't easy and it hadn't been quick, but in that moment, Emily knew she had truly begun the journey to wholeness. The weeks that followed her decision to forgive her father were the most transformative of Emily's life. She woke up every day feeling lighter, more grounded, as if the weight of years of unresolved emotions had slowly begun to lift. Each day was a step forward, a new chapter in her healing that felt both freeing and terrifying. It was as though she had been walking through a fog for years, and now she could finally see the path ahead clearly. Her sessions with Dr. Ivanov continued, but now, instead of dredging up past wounds, they focused on her future, the person she was becoming. She had already done the hard work of confronting her past, of facing the pain and the guilt that had held her hostage for so long. Now the challenge was to move forward, to embrace the person she was becoming without fear or hesitation. As she sat across from Dr. Ivanov that day, there was a calmness in her that hadn't been there before. Her eyes weren't clouded with doubt, her posture wasn't tense with anxiety. She was ready to face whatever came next, because she knew, deep down, that she was capable of overcoming anything. Dr. Ivanov, as always, was calm and composed, his gaze steady but kind. "Emily," he said, his voice steady, "you have come a long way. You've faced your past, forgiven yourself and even your father. Now the question remains, who do you want to be? What does the future look like for you?" The question hit her harder than she expected. Up until now, everything had been about healing the wounds of the past, about moving past the pain and anger that had shaped her. But now, she had to think about who she was becoming. The person she was no longer defined by the pain of her childhood, her abandonment, or her mistakes. It was time to step into her own power. Emily thought for a moment, the weight of his questions settling in her chest. She had spent so much time trying to survive, trying to navigate the world without falling apart, that she had never really asked herself what she wanted her future to be. Who was she, if she wasn't the sum of her past pain? What kind of person did she want to become? "I've spent so much time thinking about what I've lost," Emily said, her voice soft but resolute. "But I've never really thought about what I have now, what I can build, what I can create." Dr. Ivanov nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "Exactly. The past cannot define you any longer, Emily. You have the power to shape your future. You've taken the first step in healing, but now you must embrace what you are capable of. You must choose to move forward without fear, without looking back." The words sank deep into her soul, and for the first time in a long time, Emily felt a spark of excitement for the future. She'd been so focused on healing the broken parts of herself, on mending the wounds, that she had never fully considered what she could achieve once the weight of her past was lifted. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice quiet but honest. "I'm scared to move forward. What if I fail? What if I can't make the changes I need?" Dr. Ivanov's expression softened, but his voice remained firm. "Fear is natural, but it should not hold you back. It is simply a signal that you are moving beyond your comfort zone. True growth happens when you step into the unknown, when you challenge yourself to be better, to be more than you ever thought possible. You will stumble, yes. But that is part of the journey. What matters is that you keep moving forward." Emily's chest tightened, and she nodded slowly, absorbing his words. She was afraid. That was true. But for the first time in her life, she realized that fear didn't have to control her. She didn't have to let it define her actions or her choices. She could choose to embrace the unknown, to take the risks necessary to build the life she wanted. "What do I do now?" she asked, a little hesitant but filled with a newfound determination. "How do I move forward from here?" Dr. Ivanov's eyes twinkled with a hint of something close to pride. "You begin by living authentically, Emily. You embrace who you are, imperfections, flaws and all, and stop hiding from yourself. You make choices that align with the person you want to be, not the person you were afraid to become. And most importantly, you keep your heart open, not just to others, but to yourself." Emily let the words settle within her. For so long, she had been hiding from her true self, running from the pain and the fear. She had kept parts of herself locked away, thinking that if she ignored them, they wouldn't matter. But Dr. Ivanov was right. If she wanted to truly heal, she had to embrace all of herself. The broken parts, the beautiful parts, the vulnerable parts. Only then could she truly move forward. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "For everything." Dr. Ivanov gave her a small, approving nod. "You've done the work, Emily. You've faced your past and freed yourself from its hold. Now it's time for you to build your future. And remember, this is only the beginning. Life will continue to challenge you, but now you have the tools to face it. You are stronger than you know." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with a sense of pride and accomplishment. She wasn't the same person who had walked into this office weeks ago, broken and uncertain. She was someone new, someone stronger, someone capable of facing whatever came her way. For the first time in her life, Emily felt whole. Not because her past was perfect or her mistakes had been erased, but because she had learned to accept herself, to heal and to forgive. She had learned to move forward, not as the victim of her circumstances, but as the author of her own story. "I'm ready," she said, standing up and meeting Dr. Ivanov's gaze. "I'm ready to live." And that, Emily took her first step into a new chapter of her life, not defined by the pain of the past, but by the strength she had found within herself to overcome it. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living. The weeks that followed Emily's transformative session with Dr. Ivanov marked the beginning of her new life. The shift wasn't immediate, change never is, but each day, each small decision, she could feel herself becoming more in tune with the person she was meant to be. The road ahead was no longer filled with fear and uncertainty. Instead, it was a path of possibility, one that she had the power to shape. One morning, as Emily sat in her apartment, sipping a cup of tea and watching the sunrise through the window, she felt a quiet sense of peace settle over her. The chaos of her past, the confusion, the guilt, it was all still there in the background, but it no longer ruled her thoughts. It no longer defined her actions. Emily was finally learning to live in the present moment, to honor the progress she had made, and to look forward to the future with an open heart. It wasn't easy. There were days when the weight of the past would try to sneak back in, moments when doubt and fear would creep up on her, but she was no longer afraid of those feelings. She had learned to acknowledge them without letting them control her. She had learned to sit with the discomfort, knowing that it was temporary, that it didn't define her. Dr. Ivanov had once told her that healing was not about perfection, it was about progress, and that lesson had stayed with her. She wasn't looking for a perfect life, a life without pain. What she sought now was balance, acceptance, and peace, and every day she moved closer to that goal. Her phone rang, snapping her out of her thoughts. She looked down at the screen and saw it was a message from her best friend, Sarah. "Hey, Emily, how about dinner tonight? I haven't seen you in weeks. Let's catch up." Emily smiled to herself. It had been a while since she'd seen Sarah, since she'd truly connected with anyone. For so long she had kept people at arm's length, afraid that if they got too close, they might see her pain, her brokenness. But now, Emily felt ready. Ready to reconnect, to open up, and to let people in. She typed back quickly. "That sounds perfect. I'd love to. Let's do it." As she hit send, Emily felt a sense of relief wash over her. Reaching out to her friends, allowing herself to be vulnerable and present. It wasn't something she had done often before, but now it felt right. She was no longer holding back, no longer hiding behind walls. She was allowing herself to experience life, to feel it fully, without fear of what might come. Dinner that evening was everything Emily had hoped for. Sarah had always been the one person who could make her laugh, who could remind her that life was more than just the struggle. It was about connection, joy, and living in the moment. As they talked and laughed over their meal, Emily felt a sense of warmth in her chest, a recognition that the connections she had once feared were the very things that would help her continue on this journey. "So, how's everything going with you?" Sarah asked, her eyes full of concern. "I've missed you, Em. You've been so quiet lately." Emily paused for a moment, thinking about how to answer. How could she explain the changes she had gone through? How could she describe the internal shifts that had taken place, the journey she had begun to walk? "I've been figuring things out," Emily said, her voice calm but full of conviction. "I've been working on myself. Healing." Sarah raised an eyebrow, sensing that there was more to the story. "Healing? What do you mean, like therapy?" Emily nodded. "Yes, therapy. But it's more than that. I've been learning to face my past, to let go of things I've been holding on to for too long. I've been learning to forgive myself, my family, the people I've hurt. And I'm starting to feel different, lighter." Sarah's eyes softened. She reached across the table and took Emily's hand in hers. I'm so proud of you. I know how hard it's been for you, but it sounds like you're finally giving yourself the chance to heal. I'm really happy for you." Emily smiled, feeling a sense of gratitude towards Sarah. She had always been there for her, and now, more than ever, Emily understood the importance of those connections. She wasn't alone in this, she never had been. "I'm still working on it," Emily said, her voice a little quieter. "It's not all perfect. But I'm finally learning to accept where I am. I'm not letting my past hold me back anymore." Sarah nodded, squeezing her hand. "That's all anyone can do. We all have our battles, Em. But you're strong. You're not defined by what happened to you." Emily felt a rush of emotion at Sarah's words. She had spent so much time thinking she was defined by her pain, by her past, by the mistakes she had made. But now she understood that her story didn't have to be about the things that had happened to her. It was about how she chose to move forward. Later that evening, as she walked back to her apartment, Emily felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had worked hard to get to this place, to face the darkness, to forgive, and to heal. And though there would always be moments of doubt, she knew she was stronger than she had ever been. She had faced the hardest parts of herself and emerged on the other side. Now, she could move forward, not as someone defined by her past, but as someone ready to embrace the future. The journey wasn't over. There would be days when the pain would resurface, when the fear would try to take hold. But Emily knew now that she was capable of facing whatever came next. She had learned that healing wasn't about running away from pain. It was about embracing it, confronting it, and allowing herself to grow through it. As she stood in front of her apartment door, she smiled to herself, feeling the warmth of the day still lingering inside her. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living fully and unapologetically. And that was enough.